What you eat in the next few weeks can either cool inflammation, steady blood sugar, and help your brain work better, or it can keep the whole system stuck in the same tired loop, and most people do not need a reset, they need a smarter one. You're watching Senior Health and Wellness. If you want more energy, clearer thinking, cravings, and a body that feels like it is finally working with you instead of against you, we need to start where the leverage is. For most of us, that means food. What we eat changes signals moving through the gut, the immune system, the brain, and the metabolic machinery that decides whether we burn fuel cleanly or stay trapped in inflammation. They obsess over what to remove. They try to force themselves through hunger. Meanwhile, they ignore the foods that actually change satiety, microbial balance, insulin handling, and inflammatory burden. There are a handful of foods that can create a very different clinical trajectory when they show up consistently. Not once, not on a good day, consistently, because consistency is what changes biology. Leafy greens are one of the most underrated tools for appetite control, gut support, and metabolic cleanup. Not flashy, not trendy, but very hard to beat when we look at how much volume they give you for how little energy they carry. Here's the mechanism. Greens deliver fiber, water, minerals, and plant compounds your gut ecosystem can work with. They take up space, slow eating, and help beneficial microbes produce signals that support fullness. Why does that matter? Because hunger is not just willpower. Hunger is chemistry. Cravings are signaling. If your gut ecosystem is underfed and your meals are dense but not biologically satisfying, the brain keeps looking for more. You can eat a large bowl of arugula, romaine, chicory, or endive and reach fullness before you hit the kind of calorie load that processed, dense foods can deliver in minutes. Same stomach, very different message. What this suggests is simple. When we build meals on greens, we are not just eating light. We are changing the environment in which appetite operates. We are feeding microbes that help regulate inflammation. We are supporting blood vessel function. We are lowering the odds that every meal turns into a spike and a crash. So, what do we do with this? We stop treating greens like decoration. We make them the base layer. Raw, lightly cooked, or fermented if that works for you. Then we place the rest of the meal on top. That could mean fish, eggs, or a little poultry. The exact topping matters less than the order of operations. Build the base first. And if this sounds too simple, ask yourself something. How many people are struggling, not because they eat too much food, but because they eat too little satiety and too little biological support? Now, the second food shifts the conversation from volume to signaling. Extra virgin olive oil is not just a cooking fat. In the right context, it behaves more like a metabolic tool. The key is not the marketing. The key is the polyphenols. Polyphenols are plant compounds that interact with the gut ecosystem and help support a healthier inflammatory response. They matter because they can nudge the body toward better insulin sensitivity and less oxidative stress. Why do we care about insulin sensitivity? Because insulin is traffic control for energy. When that traffic control works well, fuel moves where it should. When it works poorly, glucose handling gets messy, fat storage becomes easier, energy crashes become more common, and inflammatory load tends to rise. That is where so many people are living right now. In the quieter zone of metabolic inflexibility, tired, foggy, hungry again too soon, carrying more visceral fat than they realize, and wondering why everything feels harder. Research suggests high-quality extra virgin olive oil supports the heart, the brain, and vascular health. What this suggests is that the right fat, in the right food pattern, can shift the system toward resilience instead of wear and tear. People often fear olive oil because they confuse smoke point with oxidation. What matters is the reason we are using it in the first place. So how do we apply it? We drizzle it over greens. We use it with vegetables. We build it into meals we already eat instead of waiting for some perfect overhaul. Because one of the smartest health moves is making the right action. Easy enough to repeat. If your meals are dry, unsatisfying, and joyless, you will not stay with them. Adherence matters. Biology only changes when behavior repeats. A lot of people are trying to eat less fat while living in a body that is inflamed, insulin-resistant, and undernourished at the cellular level. Sometimes the answer is not less food. Sometimes the answer is better signaling. which brings us to something people either love or avoid for the wrong reasons. Mushrooms. Mushrooms are one of the most useful foods for the gut immune conversation, especially when fatigue, brain fog, or inflammatory symptoms are part of the picture. And the reason comes down to compounds your body does not fully digest, but your microbes absolutely notice. Polysaccharides are long chains of sugar molecules. That sounds alarming until you understand the structure. These are not the fast sugars that slam your bloodstream. Many move through digestion and become food for microbes in the colon. Why does that matter? Because the gut ecosystem trains the immune system. The healthier that ecosystem is, the better chance we have of keeping the immune response active when needed, but not overreactive all the time. That balance is everything. Too little defense is a problem. Too much immune activation is also a problem. Chronic inflammation is not strength. It is collateral damage. It is the fire that starts spreading into tissues that were never supposed to be under attack. Now watch this. Some mushroom compounds, including beta-glucans, appear to support this balanced immune training. What this suggests is that mushrooms can help reinforce the gut barrier. And that matters because a compromised gut barrier can increase inflammatory signaling that reaches far beyond digestion. They think gut issues stay in the gut. They think bloating is minor. They think fatigue is just age. But once the gut barrier gets leaky, the immune system starts reacting to things it should not be reacting to so aggressively. This is educational, not medical advice. We're evidence-led and we manage risk. Certain mushrooms, like lion's mane, are often discussed for brain support because of their relationship to nerve growth signaling. BDNF is brain-derived neurotrophic factor. In simple terms, it is a growth signal that helps support neurons. Why does that matter? Because brain fog is not always a brain problem. Sometimes it is a metabolic problem, sometimes it is an inflammation problem, sometimes it is a gut immune problem that the brain ends up paying for. So what do? We use mushrooms several times a week. We cook them, we sauté them, add them to soups, fold them into bowls, pair them with olive oil, onions, garlic, greens. We make them normal. We make them easy. Some experts argue mushrooms are better cooked than raw, and that is a practical, low-risk move anyway. Better flavor, better texture, easier on digestion, easier to keep in the rotation. Now let's move to a category that changes the ecosystem even more directly. Fermented foods. Many people assume the value is only in live bacteria, but that is not the whole story. The fermentation process itself creates compounds that can influence the body in useful ways. Those compounds are often called postbiotics. Think of them as the metabolic leftovers of fermentation that can still send helpful signals, even when the food is not packed with living organisms by the time you eat it. Why does that matter? Because it means this category is more flexible than most people think. You do not need to force down one trendy fermented food you hate. You need a repeatable way to expose the body to the benefits of fermentation. That could be yogurt, kefir, sauerkraut, kimchi, or vinegar. The exact entry point matters less than the habit. A more diverse microbiome tends to be associated with a more stable gut barrier and better immune balance. That is important because the microbiome behaves like an ecosystem. Diversity helps with resilience. Monotony makes the system more fragile. If your inner ecosystem is dominated by only a few species, it is easier for the wrong signals to take over. More instability, more inflammatory noise, more unpredictable symptoms. Now, here's the question. Are your daily choices feeding the ecosystem that protects you or the one that keeps the fire smoldering? And the practical move is simple. Add fermented foods in small amounts. Use them like a condiment. A spoonful here, a splash of vinegar there. Something sustainable. Because we do not need heroics, we need leverage. And when fermented foods are combined with greens and mushrooms, something powerful starts happening. You get fermentable fibers, you get microbial support, you get compounds that may help calm immune overactivation. You are changing the terrain underneath symptoms. Now let's talk about the foods that feel indulgent, but can still work in our favor when used well. Dark berries, pomegranate, very dark chocolate, cocoa nibs. These are not just healthy treats. They are polyphenol-rich foods that can feed beneficial microbes and support cellular defense systems. That matters because oxidative stress accelerates wear and tear inside the body. Oxidative stress is basically molecular friction. Too much of it, over time, can damage tissues, disrupt signaling, and push aging pathways in the wrong direction. This is where polyphenols become interesting. Research suggests they can support mitochondrial function and pathways linked to healthy aging. Mitochondria are the power stations inside your cells. They help turn nutrients into usable energy. When they are under strain, fatigue rises, recovery drops, resilience fades. So, yes, dessert can actually become part of the strategy. A handful of dark berries with a little dark chocolate can satisfy the desire for something sweet while still delivering compounds your microbiome and cells can use. That is a very different ending to a meal than the usual ultra-processed crash cycle. When people have a nourishing, repeatable close to the day, they are less likely to spiral into late-night eating. That protects sleep. It protects glucose control. It protects next-day hunger. Now watch this, because this final food is the one many people underestimate most. Avocado. Not because it is trendy, not because it is good fat, but because it helps the rest of the meal work better. It carries monounsaturated fat, fiber, and compounds that can improve the absorption of fat-soluble nutrients from other foods on the plate. That matters more than it sounds. You can eat a beautiful salad, but if the body does not absorb key fat-soluble compounds efficiently, you are leaving some of the benefit behind. Avocado helps solve that. It also supports satiety in a way that can make the entire meal feel more complete, because when the gut ecosystem is nourished and satiety hormones are supported, the brain gets the message sooner. We stop negotiating with the pantry. We stop pretending discipline failed when the truth is the biology was never supported. So the move is simple. Half an avocado, maybe one, depending on the meal. Slice it into salads, bowls, or plates built around greens and supportive proteins. We do not need a dramatic reset built on fear. We need foods that reduce inflammatory burden, support insulin traffic control, feed a healthier microbiome, improve mitochondrial resilience, and make overeating less likely instead of demanding impossible restraint. Not with perfection. With a few high-impact foods repeated long enough for the biology to respond. Because once the gut barrier steadies, once cravings soften, once energy becomes more reliable, once the inflammation fire starts cooling, everything feels different. Which one of these foods is missing from your routine right now? And which one are you going to add first? Put it in the comments because your answer may help someone else start. And if you value clear, evidence-led health analysis without the hype, subscribe now. Because the body keeps score, the gut keeps signaling, the immune system keeps listening. And the next thing most people miss is the one that may be keeping their inflammation alive every single morning.